The South African Communist Party has condemned the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. For more on the Tripartite Alliance partners' view, we're joined by SACP First Deputy Secretary General Soli Mapaila. Mr. Mapaila, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. Looking at just the statement that has been issued by your organization, analyzing and reflecting on this conflict in Ukraine, you seem to center it all on the pitfalls of capitalism. Tell me more.
Yes, most certainly the biggest crisis we face in the world today is the unbridled capitalist unipolarity. In other words, capitalist domination, unipolar domination, meaning that the Western countries led by the US wants to impose their ideology across all regions of the world, even not just their ideology, but their unmitigated market capitalism. Of course, Russia itself has joined the capitalist world, but what they are trying to do is to make sure that everyone under the capitalist world plays to their tune. That's the center of this current crisis that we are faced with. And of course, they are using their tools and groupings in Europe, through the European Union and the NATO group, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is called a relic, which never disbanded with the disbandment of the Soviet Union as a system. So therefore, they are asserting themselves aggressively. And it's important that what Russia has done, firstly, to defend its national sovereignty, it's extremely important. It's a big lesson to the world. We also hope that this lesson will make the US and even the European Union to change their posture about domination and to appreciate that a multipolar world is possible and it's emerging, and they cannot just impose their world opinions on all regions of the world. So that's why, for instance, we feel that this war could have been avoided. For instance, if the European Union, as per the old agreements that they are party to, including the USA as well as NATO group, if they did not invite or did not even consider to accept Ukraine as part of the NATO group, because that immediately threatens national security of Russia. So if they just simply affirm that no, we won't accept Ukraine as a member of NATO, there will be no war. Ukraine is allowed to still be member of European Union, but it can't join the NATO group as per those old agreements which safeguarded the non-expansion of NATO in Eastern European countries. So they just fail to simply affirm that. On the contrary, they have instigated military expansion, military defense build-up in Ukraine, including these biological laboratories that they've been building up in Ukraine, supported by the US Defense Department with huge sums of money, and they've continued themselves to build major build-up of nuclear weapons in European countries, including those countries that do not necessarily possess nuclear capacity in their own right, like Italy, for instance. It has nuclear sites controlled by the USA. So this kind of expansionism has been met at least with their match. Of course, the threat is that it comes with the threat of human life, which is quite regrettable. That's why, as a Communist Party, we have always said, as a member of the international peace movement, we are always for peace and not for war. And we also know that the countries of the South or developing countries have no capacity militarily to stand against the developed countries, or so-called the capitalist countries of the West or the North. And we can only see those that have resisted, like Cuba, like Venezuela, like Bolivia, how they've been destabilized, Nicaragua, Palestine itself, Syria, all those that have rejected the imposition of US imperialism, Iran, and so forth, have been subjected to untold misery and attacks and sanctions that are inhuman. And for decades, they've suffered greatly. They've lost, in terms of a million people, hundreds of thousands of lives, and also some of their people have been subjected to levels of degradation, economic blockades, all through that. They didn't care about the well-being of their people. Whereas now, the way they're shouting it's as if this war in Ukraine has been going on for ages. And it doesn't mean that by saying so we support a day of war. We are saying, if possible, the war should be stopped instant. But the people who are in control of whether the war continues or not are those that are continuing to arm Ukraine at the moment, which is the USA and the European Union. USA currently approved more than $13 billion just to give more defense support to Ukraine. So basically they're perpetuating for the war. They are not calling for peace.
Mr. Mapaila, you talk about the right of Russia as a sovereign state to exist and to defend itself. Does Ukraine not enjoy that same right?
No, it certainly does. But Ukraine certainly does on the basis of limitations of both the Minsk Accord of 2014, wherein Russia had to go in and claim its earlier parts of Crimea back to Russia, because the Europeans and the Americans had instigated what they call the Orange Revolution, and it created a coup d'etat, military takeover and removal of a government in Ukraine. The situation in Ukraine did not arise democratically, by the way. It's as if we are defending a democratic outcome. It's not a democratic outcome. It was started by a coup d'etat, which led to several regions in that area of Ukraine requesting to be independent, because they were originally Russian territories, including the Donbas region, the Luhansk region, the Donetsk region, and so forth, which now the two, Luhansk and Donetsk, have now been recognized, and Donetsk have now been recognized by Russia as independent republics. But whereas Donbas, for instance, has been consistently attacked when it wanted to break away because of that military coup of 2014, instigated by the U.S., supported by the U.S. militarily, leading to Russia taking over the region of Crimea, which was now handed over to Ukraine. And by the way, the setup of Ukraine was established by communist Russia. It was not established as an old independent territory like others in the region, like Romania and so forth. So it is this that is important to appreciate, that the sovereignty of this country were limited in terms of the fall of the Soviet Union and what was created as the independent of Commonwealth states, which were some of the states which, of course, even Russian Federation initially became part of after the fall of the Soviet Union, when they were trying to integrate themselves into Europe to practice a capitalist system. But there was an agreement that, given the fact that this neighboring, which now becomes neighboring states, which would have been the borderline states of all Soviet Union with Europe, had nuclear weapons of the old Soviet Union. So there was agreement that this institution should not be part of the NATO group. Because once they are part of the NATO group...
Mr. Mapaila, the point that you're making is part of the debate that is taking place now. I hear what you're saying in as far as...